What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over how you can improve in Fortnite. Typically in my videos, we focus on more specific things like, how to win more close range fights or which shotgun is better, which mobility item is better. This video is going to be much more like general and broad and just kind of like your mindset and some things you might want to do if you actually want to get better at the game. And this should apply to like any Fortnite season or any period of time in Fortnite. As always, if you guys do find this video helpful, informative, interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and comment down below something that has helped you improve most in Fortnite. Also, if you would like to use my code in the item shop, it is just EvolveJake, like my channel name. It's underneath the webcam pretty much at all times. This resets every 2 weeks, but the new season is in 9 days as of the time I'm recording this. So if you put it in the item shop now, it should be in there at the start of next season when you're getting next season's battle pass. And again, if you enjoy the videos, I much appreciate it if you use code EvolveJake when you buy something in the item shop. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is going to just be to get in fights. One of the things that I've noticed most with a lot of newer players to Fortnite or people who are new to battle royales in general is they get on the game and they want to win. And it makes sense. That's like kind of the whole goal of the battle royale, and that's something that a lot of people measure themselves by, not only how many wins they have, but like people talk about when did you get your first win or if you gotten your first win yet. Something that's very present in the mind of a lot of new players, whether or not they've won yet. And because of this, they end up playing very passive because it makes sense. If you play passive and hide and get in less fights, your odds of making endgame are higher. And then maybe you can just get lucky in third party the last fight or get decent timing and win the game that way. And that's, if you want to play like that, play like that. And especially if you're brand new to the game and you just want to get your first win, that can definitely work. But if you actually want to get better at the game and win more games in the long run and win more consistently in the long run, I think being comfortable fighting is super important. You can win games just by hiding. I'm not saying you can't, but if you want to consistently win, I think you need to be comfortable fighting. That's kind of like the base of the pyramid, in my opinion, of like improving as a player is just getting comfortable fighting and getting good at fighting. And because of this playstyle a lot of newer players have where they play very passive, they don't get in very many fights. And if you only get in one fight every 10-15 minutes, you spend all game hiding, there's not a lot of room for you to actually improve at fighting. Every time you fight, every time you get in a fight, that's a chance to improve at fighting. That's how anything goes in life. The more you do it, the better you'll get. That's how practicing goes, right? But if you play very passive, you're not going to get in fights very often, and there's probably not going to be as much for you to take away from fights. So if you want to get better at the game, I think just getting in fights is step one. And so try to, play more aggressively, land at hot locations, push fights more, and just force yourself to get in more fights over time. You don't have to push literally everything. You can still kind of have like a middle ground where you push some fights and not others. You don't have to go from like not fighting at all to fighting everything. If you want to get fast quick, I think fighting everything is the idea. But there's a balancing act. Just try to force yourself to get in more fights. A lot of players also get nervous fighting and also get super nervous in game. And I think the best way to get over this is just to get in more fights, because you will get more comfortable fighting. You'll be used to those situations more. You'll probably also just get better at it. And so you'll have more confidence for that reason. And you'll also kind of, I feel like, learn that like, regardless if you win or lose, at the end of the game, you're just going to go back to the lobby and then ready up for the next match. Like, it really is not that big of a difference whether you win or lose. It doesn't change the game that much. It's not like you're opened up to some brand new game or anything like that. At the end of the match, everyone goes back to the lobby. And I think just getting in more fights and kind of forcing yourself to fight more, you kind of get over that like fear of losing. And then the same is true of endgame. I think the more you play and the more experience you have endgame, I think the less nervous you'll get. I think a lot of people stress about this too much. They're newer to the game and they're like, oh my God, I'm so nervous endgame. Just keep playing. Again, force yourself to get in fights. You'll get comfortable fighting. And again, even you'll realize it's not that big of a deal one way or the other. And I feel like once you realize that it's not that big of a deal one way or the other, a lot of that stress goes away. And personally, I think that's where a lot of the nervousness and the stress comes from. It's like not being confident doing the thing, not being used to doing the thing, and then also like being afraid of the outcome. And when you realize the outcome really isn't that bad and you get more comfortable fighting, you get more confidence in that, and you just get more time in these situations, you realize it's not that big of a deal. I do think it's important to focus on getting in more fights first rather than endgame, Because if you're panicking in every fight anyways, what good does being comfortable in game matter when you're probably just going to have to fight someone inevitably at some point? So step one, I think, is get in more fights and get comfortable fighting, play a bit more aggressive, and you'll build that mechanical fighting skill. You'll know what to do in these fights more often, and you'll be less stressed and you'll think more clearly. I think another thing that could be super helpful is going to be replay mode. But one thing to keep in mind is it's very buggy, and the way shooting looks can be weird at times, and this leads to a lot of people thinking that they're fighting cheaters, which, may or may not be true. But replay mode in general is super buggy, so don't focus on that like too much. I think what you want to focus on, also, I've seen a lot of players over the years, they go into replay mode and then they like argue with the game about why they shouldn't have died there. There is no like Fortnite court of appeals. Like whatever happened, happened. What you can learn from replay mode though, and what I think you do want to focus on here, is how you look in a fight. Like watch your fights back from the opponent's perspective and see what you looked like in those situations and what you looked like fighting. Because a lot of people are kind of making mistakes in the moment that they know is a mistake. They know they should use cover. They know they should be using like right shoulder peeks. They know they should be like, strafing around, maybe jumping, crouching, making themselves a hard target to hit. But once they get in the fight, kind of all that goes out the window, and then they're just like standing out in the open, shooting the opponent while standing still. And if you watch your fights back from the opponent's perspective, and you see that you're making the fight much easier for them than they are making the fight for you, and you're like an easy target, I think that it clicks a lot better when you watch it back from the opponent's perspective and see, what you look like fighting. Because like I already said, I think a lot of people know these things. They just kind of panic in the moment or don't think about it in the moment or maybe get lazy or whatever. And then like things like that happened. And you can also see, other things like what angles you're exposed to, maybe different options you had in a fight. And end game can also be really nice to look at for the same reason. You can see kind of like what options and what you could have done in replay mode that maybe you didn't think of in the moment because, you're focused on playing the game. Maybe you're like nervous in game. Maybe the adrenaline's pumping, things like that. But being able to go into replay mode and look at the situation while you're detached from it, I think can be very good. And you can kind of see some of the mistakes you're making. And if you notice that you're consistently making some of the same mistakes, that, could be things you should work on. If you're like, wow, I'm never using right shoulder peeks, or every time I fight, I'm just standing still and making it easy for my opponent. Working on things like that will probably get you a lot better results, and try not to nitpick too much. Like Fortnite is a game where you can play perfect and still lose, and you can play imperfect and still win. A lot of people go into replay mode and spend way too much time over analyzing like one situation. Like I said, you want more like general broad mistakes that you're consistently making. If there's one time you didn't reload your gun before getting into a fight, or you didn't heal before getting into a fight, or maybe you tried to heal and canceled it and didn't realize it, like it is what it is. Like there's not that much time to spend on that, but I've seen a lot of people like just get deep in the replays over analyzing stuff. And like I think you want more like broad, big picture, or like consistent mistakes you're making, not to nitpick every little minor problem or minor mistake or whatever, but I do think replay mode can be very helpful if used properly. Creative can also be an incredible tool if used properly, if you want to get better. This is really good for getting used to fighting, because the penalty for losing a fight is non-existent. If you play any of these free-for-all or like team deathmatch style maps, you can get in, 20, 30 fights in like 10, 15 minutes. Whereas like playing BR, it might be several hours worth of matches for you to get in that many fights, depending on how you play and kind of how the games go. Because you don't have to worry about like backing out of a match after you die, re-looting up, and then finding people and stuff, You just get your loot, you keep fighting consistently over time, and you can get in way more fights in a shorter time span and build that fighting skill. I think you might also be exposed to much better players in creative, which could be helpful. I think playing against people that are better than you, you take way more away from those fights than playing against like the AI, This really depends on where you're at though, because when I've made videos on some creative maps, I get comments like, the people in these games are so much better than me. I'm just getting like pooped on. And that's a good thing. If you're getting pooped on in these creative maps, there's a lot for you to take away from those fights. But I think as you get better over time and you're kind of average to above average, a lot of the people in like some of those zero build fighting maps aren't the greatest. Build mode has a lot more serious of a creative player base, I think. But either way, even if they aren't the best players, you can still just, get in fights and build that muscle memory, I do think there's more for you to gain by fighting people better than you, though. There's also a lot of aim practice and training maps. Like if you play builds, there's like building and editing piece control maps. These can also be very helpful. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of players have with creative is there's like a somewhat of a stigma against it for some people. Like they don't want to play creative. So they say like, oh, I don't have 6 hours a day to spend in creative, because that's absurd, right? If it takes 6 hours a day every day to be decent at the game, then no wonder, you're struggling. But even small amounts of time, I think, can have huge impacts. Whether it's like before you hop on to play BR, play 10 minutes in one of these fighting maps. And I think if you do that consistently within like a few weeks, you'll notice that you're a lot better than you were before, just because of the sheer amount of repetition you're getting. Spend a few minutes aim training before you play, and you'll notice you'll go into those matches, your aim feels better, you're warmed up already, so you have more to take away from those matches. I played Fortnite since the second day it came out. I didn't start to consistently see improvement in my gameplay until I started playing creative. Or like, obviously you consistently get better when you're new, but like I'd kind of stagnated for a while, and I didn't start playing creative when it first came out. It took me a while to like start consistently playing creative, and that's kind of when I feel like my stagnation ended and I got a lot better at the game with just, small amounts of time playing creative. I have made videos in the past on maps that I recommend. It'll be linked down in the description. Another thing you might want to consider doing is changing your settings, whether this be like sensitivity, keybinds, things of that nature. And this is it can go either way, because there's some people that change their settings too much, and that makes it hard to ever get comfortable in improving. I'm just talking about people who have never changed their settings at all, or maybe haven't in a while, because if you're just on default everything, odds are those aren't the best settings for you. And then also, if you haven't changed it in a while and you feel like you haven't been improving, maybe looking at something like that can help you. I'll have a video down in the description below as well where I talk about the settings. One thing to keep in mind here, like I kind of said, is that you don't automatically need to change them. It's just something that you should maybe consider. If you feel like people move so much faster than you're able to track, maybe you need to raise your sensitivity. If you feel like your aim is not consistent at all and it's hard for you to make small adjustments, maybe you need to lower it. And then same things go with keybinds. Your keybinds may or may not be optimal. If you're on controller, you want to be taking your thumbs off the analog sticks as little as possible. Don't know much about keyboard settings because I play controller, but these are just things to look at and think about. The mistakes that I think you want to avoid is just thinking that you always have to change settings if you aren't playing well, because I kind of already said it, but if you're always changing them, you're never going to be comfortable and you're never going to build that muscle memory. And then I think another thing is that a lot of players just copy like streamer or content creator settings, thinking that they'll automatically play as good as that player and that they need to force themselves to use that player's settings. I said I would have a video of my settings linked. It doesn't mean you need to use my settings. I just kind of talk about the different things in that video and what they do and what I think about them. You might want to copy someone else's as like a starting point, but I think copying somebody else's and feeling like you have to use that can be a mistake a lot of players make. And the final two things I want to talk about are pretty quick. And the first is just going to be to adapt to the meta, because Fortnite is a game that's always changing. And let's just take Chapter 5, for example. A lot of times in Chapter 4, the pumps were very good, and like a pump spray was often popular in Zero Build, and you could definitely do that, and it was good. There was times where like the exotic Maven was insane, but let's just look at normal loot pool. A lot of times it was Havoc pump and spray weapon, right? We come to Chapter 5. The Frenzy auto shotgun is much better than the hammer pump for Zero Build, and if you just kept using the pump the entire time, respect to you, but you probably didn't do as good as if you were going to use the auto shotgun, because the auto shotgun is just incredible this season. And then same goes with the snipers. The snipers been solid for a lot of Chapter 4 as well. They just weren't as popular. But let's just say you didn't like sniping, you're not good at sniping, and you just never use snipers this season. You can do well and you can win games, but again, we can kind of all agree that the snipers are very powerful in Chapter 5, so taking advantage of them is pretty good. And Fortnite is always a game that is like that. The meta changes season to season, and that's just kind of how it's been. I don't like the meta very much this season. I don't want to use the auto shotgun. How sniper centric everything isn't my preferred playstyle, but the game is the game right now, and you can either adapt to the meta and use what's good, or not and make things harder for yourself. It's just going to be easier if you use the things that are good. The same goes with mobility. There's a lot of people who refuse to use mobility items or think it's dumb or lame, or like they don't think it's good. But over time, more and more of those people, as they play the game longer, start using mobility and realize how good it is. Like I remember in chapter 3 when Zero Build first came out, I talked about how good shockwaves are, and so many players pushed back against it in my comments. And then like months later, we're like, yeah, you were right. Shockwaves are insane, and they are like very helpful. So just being open to adapting to what's meta is pretty helpful. This next point is kind of contradictory to that, and that's going to be to not rely on crutch items too much. And crutch items, things that I just think are very low skill, like the riot shield. If the only way for you to eliminate other players is with the riot shield, what's going to happen when they remove that? You know, if you rely super on like the grenade NPCs, what are you going to do when you don't have that NPC or somebody eliminates it, or maybe like the NPCs get removed? The sticky launcher in the past, there's been a lot of like gimmicky items, and I get that these gimmicky crutch items can be good. And that's where I kind of said it's like kind of contradictory, because I just told you to use what's good, but I hope you can kind of understand that like there's a difference between using the auto shotgun and fighting with that, even though it's much less skillful than a pump meta. There's like a difference between that and like relying on the business turret to kill everybody for you, because if they vault the business turret and you've spent weeks relying on that to get kills, when it's gone, what are you gonna do? So like I said, it can be kind of contradictory, but I hope you kind of get what I'm saying. If you want to use those items, fine. But if you're relying on that as like your only way to get kills, then you're setting yourself up to be very impacted if that item ever gets vaulted, and then you're just kind of starting back at square one, trying to use the regular guns again. So use what's good, but try not to rely too much on kind of gimmicky crutch items. I get that that can kind of be confusing and those points contradict each other. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this helpful, informative, interesting. Like I said, it's more broad and less specific than what I typically make. But with us being at the end of the season, I thought something like this would be helpful, because, you know, who knows how the game is going to change next season and how different the meta is going to be. On that point about adapting the meta, you know, subscribe to the channel if you do want to stay updated on like what's good in Fortnite Chapter 5. And if you enjoyed this, give it a like, sub if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.